First of all, quick introduction. So why am I talking about a dilemma of generations? And by that I mean people, both us, but probably more importantly, the people we work with, both in terms of our teams, but also of our colleagues. Sadly, I now have 30 years plus experience of professional services businesses, hence the lack of hair and the colour of hair that is left. But I have had the opportunity to work in some fairly large companies, all people-based. So I've had the joys of bringing finance to architects, lawyers, other accountants, and also chartered engineers. Today I'm with Handley House. So Handley House is a firm of architects. We are based in Newark in Nottinghamshire, but probably 80–85% of our business is now based in Asia, predominantly Shanghai. Just starting to grow in Singapore, Shenzhen, but also a fairly steady office in Hong Kong. Our two most notable recent projects, I was about to say for anybody that travels, but this is probably a bit of a memory test. The one we did was what we call Jewel, which is Terminal 4 in Changi Airport, which has the largest indoor water feature in the world. To give some idea of the scale, the track on the left is actually the main line coming into the airport. And the other one for the moto sport buffs, we did Ferrari World in Abu Dhabi, which is the Ferrari-based theme park, but also where they do the Grand Prix. So those are two, I'll admit, the best examples of what we do. We do a lot more boring stuff, to be brutally honest, but they always look better on a presentation. So, why am I up here talking about new challenges and why are we facing them? And I'm really talking about the perspective of people, our teams. I mean, how many times recently have people interviewed people for a role and come out of the interview feeling that you've been interviewed or you were having to sell your company, whereas years ago they used to just march them in one by one and you picked the best candidate and on you moved? Well, we are seeing what I would call seismic shifts in the generational needs and values. And I'll go on to how we categorise those in a few minutes. But just to make things even more interesting, we have a world that's redefining normality post-COVID. I say post-COVID being an optimist. And a nation seeing the impacts of Brexit crystallise, which in itself are bringing some particular challenges to us. When I joined the company 3 years ago, 40% of our architects in London were Spanish. So we are definitely, personally, we are seeing a big shift in our labour force and ability to secure resource. So, in the next 35–40 minutes, what are we going to consider? For me, the big one is what our future team members will want from us and what will they be able to offer. And I think that, it's like anything, the client rules, and I think these days we need to really understand what the new workforce or the younger members coming into our team will really want. And it hasn't necessarily been a decision they've made. As I go on, there's things that shape people in generations, and the generation coming through now are markedly different to some of us. Secondly, we'll touch on the COVID pandemic because I think the two are working quite closely together. And then a few thoughts on the future, but also your thoughts on the future. So, what will our team members be able to offer? So first of all, who are we talking about? First of all, who in here consider themselves to be a millennial? Okay. There's not a trick, it's just that I'm not a millennial, surprise, surprise, but I think there's enough of you in here to consider that millennials, Generation X, and even the old baby boomer dotted about, we are the sort of where we are today. The new generation, there's no Generation Z in here, are there? If there are, I'm so sorry. No? Right. And really what shapes each of these generations, and there's no science, I don't know who actually dictates when a generation starts and finishes. Apparently it's some sort of seismic event. Some last for 20 years, some last for 10 years. But what shapes them is parenting, apparently technology and economics. So clearly as the changes come through, the changes then feed into the parenting. Technology, well, we all know what's going on there. And economics, well, we've had a really interesting ride. Firstly, us. So the good news. Apparently we are the best workers. We have accepted that our work-life balance has to be juggled, but most of us, most of the older ones in here have generally lent more to the demands of the work rather than home, and with a focus on the career path, and those two very much go hand in hand. So we're traditionalists, some of us, and very much about the career path, and therefore it's what do I need to do at work to develop the career path. So that's the good news. However, apparently we're resistant to change. We'll test that in a few minutes. We're often challenged by technology. I'm just so pleased this has got a green button so I know which one to press. Often challenged by technology. And finally, we're easily dissatisfied with management, but we do keep things to ourselves. Does anybody disagree with any of those? Rather than agree, does anybody disagree?
I disagree with it, but you do get split for disagreeing.
No, you disagree. But you're a millennial. So, millennials, first of all. So, an area, and as I said earlier, the lines are very blurred. So I thought I'd just bring in millennials and look at positives and challenges. I accept that a fair proportion of the room are millennials, but given I'm not, I'm allowed to talk about you. The positives are very much passion for learning, free thinking and creative, financially astute. Being a CFO, I wish that was more widespread. It really does seem to pass certain professions by. Technologically competent, and openly receptive to feedback and recognition. There you go. And you're also very, very confident in your own abilities. And I think that's probably true to previous generations. It's a more generic issue. In terms of the challenges, nomadic's a good one. You feel far less inclined to have a sense of being tied down to a role or a company. Far more impatient. There's a start for the disregard of the traditional career pathway, and needs really meaningful motivation, transparency, and also the start to see what we call conscious capitalists. And what that is people that will look up to businesses that take the whole spectrum of stakeholder values and engagement in place, not just the profit. So when I started, the first hints of social and environmental was the talk of the triple bottom line. But at the end of the day, being brutal, 20 years ago, it was something you sort of dusted off when you did your annual report. You made sure the profit number was right, and then you found some great words to put in about the environment and the people around you, apparently. For this generation, black swan moments, they are the part of what shapes. They are the sort of major... some describe them as catastrophes, some describe them as notable events, and they usually have a negative connotation. Most here would actually witness 9/11 and then the ensuing global financial crises. So that's in theory what shaped the millennials. And really the ones moving forward that I just want to keep in mind are these, and I think these challenges will really feed through to how we think in future of developing our teams, securing our workforce and motivating them. Now the more interesting ones, I feel a bit safer now because there's hardly any of these in the room. So, positives. At ease with multitasking, so that comes from watching sons and daughters these days. They're watching telly, they're doing something on the phone, they're doing something else. It's just so natural. Another real positive is they don't even see diversity as an issue. It's just a complete non-issue. So a lot of us have had to be educated, some to more degrees than others. Then the millennials have came along, which has really driven the change through, but it's at a point now where it's not even a point to discuss, which I think is really good. Natural entrepreneurs, again, everything's just a click away. the first truly digital generation and highly communicative. The challenges, and this is where it really starts to impact on what we need to consider. They have a very low loyalty to any company or any organisation, and it's far more transactional. So it's what's in it for me, I want 2 years, I want some cash, I want to go do something else. Work-life balance is key in its broadest sense. They will have seen that develop through the years. A company has to be authentic. So again, I referred earlier to the, shall we say, the more traditional approach, the triple bottom line. Well, this is true. This truly has to be part of what the company can offer. Things like the B Corps. I don't know if anybody here works for a B Corp. It's an organisation that will go through and accredit you. And if you achieve it, and it is pretty hard to get through, then you're very much seen as having due reference and focus on the various parts, being social, environmental. Profit really doesn't, and the financial side really doesn't feature at all in its analysis. Far more cautious and pessimistic. Well, at the end of the day, if the early ones were born in 2000, they will have been born, 9/11 is almost a historic event, so all they've known is the war on terror and all of the uncertainty post that. Reliant on social media, it's not a luxury but a necessity. That can bring its challenges. And at the end of the day, they're always seeking a new challenge, so probably not as settled as some of us were. Their black swan moment has now been defined as COVID. So again, not a very positive impact on us. And really sort of take forward, it's the low loyalty, the work-life balance, and they're always seeking a new challenge. And those are the sorts of things that are really going to ring home when we start to look at how we develop our teams and our future workforces. So, to summarise what I've talked through so far, I think looking at it from our perspective, the future is going to be more challenging. The real question is, are we going to be the issue? Is it us? Because the forces are so great in the way the generations are being developed, what's impacted them. Again, having grown up through recession, 9/11, COVID, haven't even mentioned Brexit yet. To what degree are we going to have to change the way we work and the way we think? Because I think there is such a critical mass now in the traits that are coming through. The challenge will be on us. People often talk about recruit and retain. Well, if you believe half of what I put up there, it could well become recruit and then recruit again. So going back to the transactional piece, the loyalty piece, and when I say loyalty, I don't mean it in a detrimental way. It's just the way people will view work going forward. They will not see a 5 to 10 year path in a business. Do we need to rethink the way we train and develop staff? Finally, on this part, a couple of years ago, I did an article for Reed. They used to do this thing called the big question, where you set a topic. They would send out some questions, you'd get all the responses back, and then you had about 24 hours to write this article, and then it was used for various publications, etc. And I was asked to do on a similar subject. Anybody works in HR here? Good. I've brought through one or two slightly more interesting comments that never actually made my article, but sort of made me smile. But at the same time, kind of reflected on very much the old school view of what I'm talking about today, and probably set out what some of the challenges might be. So the first one was, we've now made changes to the uniform, and we also allow beards and visible tattoos. That's the first one. The second one, the schools are to blame. They're generating expectations that aren't available. And these were serious responses. And the last one, oh dear, we have to make our company appear funky. So that was a couple of years ago, but those were actual comments coming back on a questionnaire. Anybody any thoughts, questions on the joys the new generations are going to bring us, or indeed the joys you are bringing us? Yeah.
It's really interesting sort of listening to you talk about the differences in the generations. I think looking back on my own career, one of the ways I learned was by doing what the new generation would call probably boring tasks. I remember being thrilled to be taken to a client meeting, allowed to take notes and write minutes. That was great.
Yeah.
More recently, I've had the experience of running an intern program, and one of the interns turned around and said to me, I've been asked to go to a meeting and take notes. I mean, that's just preposterous. And I think my question to you is, how do we go about ensuring that we're creating a generation of future finance leaders who have the relevant knowledge and skills to really understand what it is that they're being asked to do? You know, I see it time and time again now with, and no disrespect to anyone who works in sort of professional services, you know, managers in accounting practices where they don't understand the basic fundamentals of what they're being asked to because they've never had to do it. So how do we overcome that as a challenge while still inspiring future generations to want to be part of our workforce?
That's a really good question, and I was only talking to a partner of PwC yesterday, and they're having to completely rethink the pathway to partner because you've lost this huge chunk of training. At the end of the day, at the end of the thing I'll say, and I'll say it now, is what we really have to do is focus on ultimately what do we want to deliver and what do we need to deliver, and then sort of work backwards. I think part of it, I think the training period and the route to professional qualifications has to change dramatically. And I'm not necessarily saying water down the double entry, etc., but a bit like you, I'm sometimes aghast when I say double entry and I get this glazed look from a newly qualified accountant. I'll go through double entry later if anybody wants me to, but take me back a few years. So I think a large part of it is in the training phase and sort of getting people almost before they come into the workplace. I think then we just got to be really smart in the workplace. And I think one of the things we can do and try to work to do, and I think, IT will help that, is sort of start to really flatten the structures rather than have this, where you'll spend so long as a junior, then so long as a senior and associate, and then move through. I don't think that helps. And I think with people with much shorter expectancies on companies, as you say, well, you've got about 5 levels to go through before you get to director or whatever, that will just completely turn them off. So I think flatten the structures. But I think, and what I said a few minutes ago, I think we will be the challenge. I think we have got to completely rethink how teams work. What is a team? What is our perception of what is hard work? So I can remember, I used to know what time the boss got in, so I was there 5 minutes beforehand. I sat down just as he was coming through the door, and this, to be seen to be there when somebody arrives and then when somebody leaves, that's now completely irrelevant. Well, it should be. So I think we ourselves need to just take a step back and say, how do we deliver, and what do we want to deliver to the business? Because the business will be full of people with these new values as well. It's not just finance that's going to go through this. So for me, I think the training needs to change dramatically, flatten the structures, and then we have to trust in IT far more, and we have to get used to the things people are looking for these days. So remote working, working as almost teams but not teams, so virtual teams, etc. But those will all have challenges. It's not going to be easy. And one of the joys of 30 plus years of experience is I haven't got too many more to go, so I'm going to sit back and does that answer you? It's a really good question, and it's very, very difficult to answer.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Because you're saying that, thank you, the new generations have unrealistic expectations, but aren't we partly to blame?
I'm not saying that. That was a quote.
Sorry. Your presentation says
yes,
that.
Yes, sorry. That was a quote from somebody.
No, but I think that is how many people feel about younger generations.
Yes.
It's unrealistic, but aren't we to blame? Because if you read a job ad for an entry-level job, they all sound fantastic, like you have a lot of responsibility. In reality, you click into one Excel sheet, copy and paste it into the next one. Is it time to change that and actually be transparent in a job ad and actually be honest? Thank you.
Yes. In my UK team, we have just gone through that, and we thought we were transparent and open and said, you know, going through times of change, roles could change, etc., etc. And we lost somebody after 3 months because they said the role is not as described. It was, but clearly we hadn't described it properly. So we weren't, it was the transparency piece. We thought we were transparent, but again, it comes back to the, you know, who's the issue? Is it them or us? So we've gone back and looked at the way we described the role, because clearly whoever's right or whoever's wrong is irrelevant. This person came in, they had the skills we wanted and they weren't happy, so they left. So, you know, we have to take a step back and think, right, how do we do it differently? But yeah. Okay, I'll crack on with technology.
Can I
Yeah, sure.
The question is about the element of competition. I mean, the challenge to deal with the younger generations. My observation is also because at the end, you know, you want to have a high-performing team that is intrinsically motivated, that is also happy by doing the job. It's about, you know, that what you described as cultural traits of people by bringing in, you know, people from a different background. I mean, someone, for instance, working class, going to the university for the first time and striving for professional success. We have recently hired someone from China, also again from a poor background, going to the university for the first time, getting a scholarship in European university. When you bring in these type of people, even if they're sort of like 25, you don't have that, you know, of the observation. But that is also positively, I think, influencing the rest of the team.
Yep.
Do you have these type of observations as well, or?
Yes, so I've tried to bring in, so I have predominantly my two teams are one Hong Kong based, a smaller team in Shanghai, and then Newark in Nottinghamshire. I was thinking of trying to move people around, but something got in the way of doing that, so they're all staying where they are for now. But one thing I have definitely tried to do as vacancies have arisen is not bring people in from architectural businesses. So I've looked to bring in people from other trades. Also, personally, I'm very much more interested in the individual rather than necessarily the technical skills. They have to have them to a degree. Or it would be quite a dangerous thing to do at certain roles. But for me, it's difficult actually, although it's not so difficult with a small team. But there's clearly at times the more junior levels, they wanted to see a future. And you almost had to have a path to development. That to some degree is going away, and one of the advantages of what was a disadvantage is if people are far more transactional, you're going to get a greater rotation of staff, which in itself might be challenging, but I think that's something we'll have to get used to. That said, that does give you an opportunity to bring in fresh blood at various levels, and there isn't that expectation of, well, why didn't I get the job? I've been here 7 years, it must be my turn, which is something you used to hear. And so, yeah, definitely bring in a mix. Okay. COVID. Has it brought in real change, or is it simply accelerating what was already in train? So first of all, so let's look at working post-COVID. And first of all, just to see how the business community on a whole is all sort of pulling together in the right direction. So we've got PwC, they're going to split between office and home working after COVID. BDO, on the other hand, have said people can work where they like. So two of the top 5 have very differing views. KPMG, another one, are thinking of closing their London office and moving everybody to home working. The banks, bless them, well, they're divided, which is always a good thing. And even within, where they try and find some sort of commonality, the US and Europe are split. That's another good thing, not unusual. UK ministers reject post-COVID right to work, which probably means in 6 months' time it'll be enshrined in law. And finally, developers are having to rethink the office after coronavirus. I put those up there as just examples. Personally, we are seeing a lot of challenge, particularly for architects, and I don't mean that in any way in a negative way, but when I have seen architects best at work is when they're around a big table with the drawings and they're scribbling and arguing and fighting and doing whatever. But actually what comes out of that is quite exceptional, and that is the one thing we have really struggled to replicate electronically, and we just can't do it. We've tried whiteboards, having whiteboards post on Zoom, etc., and it is just not the same thing. So that is one big issue for us. So we are working hard in our office to get them as safe as possible. And really what we're doing is reshape. We have a 4-floor office in London. We're taking 2 floors, completely clearing them all desks and just having very, very big tables where people can stand around but at a greater space. Because we will always have people working from home or hybrid models of at home working in the office. So what we're trying to do is make the safest space as possible, but whilst people are happy to come in and work there. So at this moment in time, well, to be fair, we're only just coming out of COVID, so there is no consensus. My gut feel is there will never be consensus, and we'll have to have different models for different environments. I think, though, what we're seeing definitely will be revolution, not evolution, partly through the speed at which things are moved. So people have always said in the past, you should evolve rather than revolve, but I don't think that's the case here. I think we're all going to have to move very, very quickly. I think for many, work-life balance has actually been enhanced. Personally, I'm one of those. I live just outside of Brighton. I used to travel into London every day where my desk was, and I'd spend most of my time on the phone to either Shanghai, Hong Kong or Newark. I do that from home now. It would have probably been frowned on a year and a half ago that I never went into the office and never sat at my desk, but I do exactly the same thing but sat at home, so hands up, selfish me, I prefer it. But wherever we get to, in each business and each profession, having come from professional services, it has to be right for both the individuals. I think there's no denying there's a shift in weight and we're going to have to do something different. But it also has to be right for us, and most importantly, in professional services, the clients, because if you don't get the service there, it doesn't work. I've been through 2 audits now. They were particularly challenging, technically proving we were a going concern. We had 2 years spent sat in the bank account, and I still had to prove we were a going concern. But also, I did an M&A on Zoom. I still have not met anybody from the company I acquired. So that should happen shortly. But as I said, the clients, professional services, clients are the most important thing. I think the 8-hour bubble's gone. It probably had done to a degree anyway, but in the olden days when you went into the office, you had this period of time where you were at work and you were focused on work, and it was slightly easier to manage. And also personally, if you was in work, you focused on work. That's clearly gone. So it's more like a 12 to 13-hour blurry half-burst bubble now where you're at home, you have your breakfast, you go and do some work, you come away. At times, in certain circumstances, getting everybody together at one point in time can be more difficult. So that's one of the particular challenges. You don't have that sort of clear line of, well, you're in the office, you're at work now. As I said earlier, we need to be clear in our own minds what we consider to be hard work and what teams will look like. So it won't be somebody who was sat at the desk for 10 hours doing whatever. To be brutally honest, that was never the measure of hard work anyway. But we will need to be clear what we think and what we want going forward. I heard this the other day. Zoom is great, but we just need to plan spontaneity. And what the person was referring to was, well, because you don't meet in the breakout areas or for a drink or a coffee or whatever, when things happen spontaneously, we now need to plan it. He actually said that, and then he kind of looked at me and thinking, did I actually say that? So I'm not quite sure how on earth we plan spontaneity, but that's one of the things we have definitely seen gone missing. And as I said earlier, having a group of architects around the table, that's when you used to see this come out in some of the designs they were doing. If anybody cracks that one, well, please patent it. One of the challenges we are seeing is that we have people now looking to lock in benefits that were not available pre-COVID and actually shunning conditions they'd readily accepted. And the classic one is commuting. We've got people now saying, well, it cost me £5,000 to commute. I'm not prepared to spend that sort of money. So, hang on a minute, you signed up to this 2 years ago. You've got the London waiting on your salary. So there does need to be I think there will need to be some tougher discussions with some individuals. Not all, but we are definitely seeing some of that. Right, the future. Quickly, so just to conclude, what I thought I'd just quickly close on was the four faces of a CFO. It's always better. I like four faces. I've been called two-faced so many times, but let's go for four. But I think this is how PwC, and there are so many different models, but this is how PwC described the role of a CFO. And clearly there, 2 to 3 of those are going to be dramatically impacted by what we're seeing coming through, be it from the generations, be it from post-COVID. I haven't really touched on Brexit, but Brexit will bring some of us, certainly in terms of, for us operator, in securing some of our resources. I think the only one that's safe down there at the bottom is scorekeeper and guardian, but to be honest, I always saw that as the sort of fourth one on the list. As I said, I think we've really got to, I think to a degree we already used to do this, but ultimately it's all about what are we trying to do and then working back as to how we do it. The olden days of, well, I've got my finance team there, I've got my computer system there, right, what am I going to do now for the business? They're long gone. It's all about getting the business in the best shape possible. I think also emotional investment will be so much harder to secure, yet I think it will be worth even more than ever, partly because you're just not sat with the people as often, and it is difficult. You know, Zoom has been great, Teams been great, but you know, you don't get that real touch and feel of being in the room and looking people in the eye. So I think that's something definitely that will take quite a bit of work. So finally, over to you. Any questions, thoughts? I think I'm nearly out of time. Yeah.
You touched on the idea of the 8-hour bubble being gone, and you also talked about from your own personal experience that you actually prefer the working from home, completely, empathise with the lack of commute. But I guess, how do we as leaders ensure that our teams aren't burning themselves out? I've listened to lots of sort of discussions about, productivity has increased. And I'm not sure that's really true. I think actually people are just working longer hours because there isn't that divide between home and work. So how do we protect our teams from that, do you think?
Personally, working with my 2 team leaders, we have a call most mornings. I will certainly call Hong Kong early on, partly because it's getting later on in the day. And we just because we're apart, I have found, because we talk daily and plan what we're going to do, I'll do silly things like I just keep an eye on email, especially Hong Kong. If it goes past sort of 11, 12 o'clock, you're sort of getting late into the evening, and I will just, if things are still buzzing around, I'll just send an email or a WhatsApp or something saying, look, that's it, time for the day. I think we just have to be far more hands-on and use the sort of technologies that are available. Also, cultural differences. It is really difficult with, say, Hong Kong, China, because they are so driven to work the hours and do whatever. Sometimes I just ring them and say, stop it, it'll wait till tomorrow. Because at the end of the day, one of the advantages then is, they're up at about 2 a.m. our time, so they've got the time. So sometimes it's probably making the sacrifice. I personally, if I have to say, okay, well, I'll get up early tomorrow and finish this off, rather than sat here at 4 o'clock in the afternoon saying I need to do it today, which is kind of midnight Hong Kong time. So I think it's far more personal interaction. That's the only way for me.
Hi. I really liked your thoughts about the millennials and Generation Z. So personally, I think we've got a huge amount of people coming into the workforce who've been brought up on screens and who are addicted to phones, and they are coming into the workforce now, and it is up to us as leaders to actually help with the mental health problems that are going to exhibit in the workplace. And I think they've been exacerbated by COVID. Are you expecting that to happen? And what kinds of thoughts have you around that, or plans? Because I feel it's going to happen.
Yes. So, yes. So first of all, what we will not be doing is become draconian, saying, why are you looking at your phone in the middle of the day? You should be working, because, it's, as I said with Generation Z, it's so intuitive. If we try to stop people using their phones, it's just not going to work. have more loo breaks, or they'll go out for a fresh air break or something, and then the phone comes out. So you've got to learn to work with that and accept it. And ultimately, I take the view, as long as I get what I need by when I need it and it's of the right quality, I'm fine, and I'm not too bothered what people were doing during that period. We are certainly, we've actually brought somebody in within the HR team to head up the whole wellbeing piece. And that was something we were pushing hard for. So, you know, it's not my area of expertise, other than I know as a firm, and we've got sort of 300 professionals globally. We brought somebody in to look at the whole wellbeing, mental health piece. So from my role, I've signed off on the investment of a person to take care of that, because I can see it's going to be such an issue.
Just a quick thought on the different generations. I think the change has to come from both sides. They have to understand that in a workplace you need certain different types of skills, especially interpersonal skills. You can't solve everything through a text, for example. So I think the change has to come from both sides. Just give you an example.
To my daughter.
Well, I mean, they are technology savvy, and
Yeah.
the other day my 8-year-old son was playing a game, and I said, "What do you learn from it?" Nobody told me. "Oh, teamwork, Dad. Look, that's my friend, and we are trying to kill some zombies." I said, "Teamwork through an online game." I said, "How can you do that?" "I'm doing it." And he showed me that. So which I was stuck in my head that he's talking about teamwork from an online game. It's amazing. I mean, you know, and the other day I was watching a movie and there were a lot of fight scenes in there. I said, "Dad, what do you learn from this one?" "Well, nothing." So you see, it's a smart generation, but they have to be guided as well. I think the interpersonal side of things is something they, I think, lack, because they've been so much on technology and so much on small text to, "Hey, where you are? What's up?" You see, so we have to help them as well, but we have to also accept that this is a different generation. And we don't understand that generation as we think we do. Kids are a perfect example of that.
And I think that's why slowly we will become more and more the issue, because we'll become the minority. And as I said, there is such a critical mass to what they bring and offer, and we see as challenges, that we'll either get swamped, or we have to learn how to work with them. Making them sound like aliens now. Well, back to my daughter. Anyway.
All right, okay, thanks. On the generational issue with selling services, there was an impassioned article in City AM a couple of weeks ago about saying that actually the older generation, you, are depriving the younger generation of your skills by not going into the office. And you are holding back their development because you're not attending meetings with them, they're not seeing your body language. But I'm aware, obviously you work for a professional services firm who are trying to sell services to people through Zoom. I'm assuming you're not yet doing in-person meetings. Do you think that Handley Group is going to be held back, or just general professional services in the future, because a generation potentially forever is going to grow up not having in-person meetings?
To a degree. I mean, it's very much a personal thing. Referring to the earlier question of how do you develop the teams and staff, it's very much a personal thing. So we've been open since we're allowed to open, but we went to the red-blue. So we had Monday, Tuesday was red, Wednesday, Thursday, blue, and then every alternate Fridays. I have personally committed and spent probably the last 5 or 6 Monday, Tuesdays up in Newark. We're not lucky enough to have big architects. We've got a couple of flats attached, so I can at least stay somewhere that's relatively safe, not sort of hotels, etc. So I'm personally relatively comfortable with that. So I personally have committed days to be with the team, and that has been, I don't want to sing my own praises here, but that has gone down really, really well. You feel a completely different dynamic. Hong Kong, I will be on the first flight to Hong Kong. A year and a half ago, I had a team of 4 with an FD and a financial controller. I've still got a team of 4, but I've got a new FD, new financial controller, and both were interviewed, etc., through Zoom, etc. So I haven't met half of my team and the two most senior people in Hong Kong. I think also, as I said earlier, you know, some of the professional firms are looking at how you develop through and go from junior to partner. I think we have a slight stay of execution in terms of selling to the clients, because most of the clients are slightly more senior. So the ones on the sort of buy side we're still seeing are not quite the Generation Z pure millennials. So I think we've got a little bit of time there. But you know, if we stay in a simple Zoom model, then definitely the teams will suffer and there will be a loss of value. But I think it's for each of us to just think through how we can pass that on. And that's part of my thinking through why I've sort of thought about this topic in so much detail, because I knew we need to do something. Personally, I do think we have to get back to face-to-face contact, which then goes back to the new model has to be sustainable for both for the employees, the clients, and also the firm ourselves. Okay.
Neil, thank you very much. That was really insightful, and I think it's worth reflecting on the challenges we're all going to face in hiring and attracting and retaining the talent. And just to mention, one of the things we tried at Cisco was our leadership team had reverse mentors from people coming straight in from university, and they were mentoring on us on how to communicate with other generations, and it was quite eye-opening, actually. So it's something to think about. But really appreciated all the insight today and the challenges you're seeing and how you're approaching them. So thank you very much.
Thank you.